With so many amazing and wonderful cars to see here at the Coventry Motofest, it is almost impossible to choose our favourites, but we're gonna give it a go. This is Overdrive.
We're here today with the Austin Grand Prix car from 1908, part of the British Motor Museum's collection. And Paul, can you tell us a bit of the history of this car?
Okay, this car was originally built for the 1908 French Grand Prix. They actually built 4 cars for the Grand Prix, 2 of which were shaft drive and 2 of them were chain drive. The 2 shaft drive cars actually suffered collisions during the practice for the event, so they rebuilt those 2 cars into 1 car, and that's what this car is. And it was actually driven in the 1908 Grand Prix, came 18th or 19th, and after the event the cars were sold off to be used as sports tourers. And this was sold to a gentleman who used it for a good many years, and then in the 1960s actually gifted it back to the Austin Motor Company, which is why it's still in the collection with us today.
That's fantastic, and I've seen this running around the track here at Coventry, and it looks phenomenal. It's so lovely to see these types of machines still running. So while we're stood on this side of the car, I can't help but just be drawn to this engine bay. All the copper and the brasswork is stunning. Can you tell us a bit more about the engine?
Yeah, well, the engine is very nearly 10 litres in capacity, 6 cylinders. It's actually got 2 rows of spark plugs. One side is a magneto drive, and the other side is a conventional coil, but I think that must have been added at a later date. It was probably twin magnetos, which were not that reliable in their day, so that's why you'd have 2 of them to ensure you get some sort of spark to it. Cross-flow head, but with side valves. So you've got the inlet on this side with twin carburetors, feeding across to the exhaust valves on the reverse side. Would only be a 3-gear gearbox with a reverse. Very difficult to drive. Despite the 171 brake horsepower that you've got out of those 10 litres. So not greatly efficient for its day. Very good torque, because the engine would probably only rev to about 2,500 RPM. You know, when you compare it to modern motorcycles that rev up to thousands of RPM, it would be very different to what you'd see on a modern car.
So I'm here with Paul again, but this time with 2 70-year-old British icons. We have the first ever Land Rover and the first ever Morris Minor. So Paul, can you just give us a bit about how these came to be in the collection?
Okay, the very first Land Rover is an interesting story, in as much that when the car was built, it was actually sold to a Warwickshire farmer who actually used it for its full lifetime. So it did a full working job as a farm tool, and then it was actually bought back by the Rover company, the Land Rover company, and restored, which is why we've still got it in our collection today.
And I must say, it looks fantastic even after all these years. I would never have guessed it had been a farm vehicle.
No, and not only that, but it also still runs. This morning it's been in the lead vehicle for the parade of Land Rover vehicles starting from the outskirts of Coventry, and it's done a lap round the circuit here at the Coventry Motofest as well.
That's fantastic. I'm also led to believe there's a really interesting story behind the Morris as well. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if we go back to the 1970s, they were coming up to the build of the 1 millionth Morris Minor, and that would have been the very first British car to produce a million cars. And to celebrate that, they actually produced a limited run of millionth edition cars, and they painted them all in a purple colour, a nice lilac colour. And they held a competition to see if they could find the oldest existing Morris Minor, and a family came forward with their car, which just happened to be the very first car that came off the production line. And so a trade was done for a brand new millionth edition Morris Minor for the very first one. And so that's very fortunately why we've still got this iconic car in our collection today.
Well, they are both truly icons and in pristine condition, as I've already said. So you've got some of the historical documents here. I believe you have those as part of the museum for many different cars.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we do at the museum, not only do we keep the history of the cars themselves alive and on view, but in the background of the museum we've actually got a lot of the archive from the British motor industry, and part of that are the production records for a lot of the BL brands and Aston Martin and other cars as well. And this allows us to produce a certified copy of the production record, and that's what I've got here. These are some examples of that, the standard certificate and the premier certificate, and this gives you the details that somebody painstakingly recorded in handwriting in the production records of the colour of the car, when it was made, when it was delivered. In a lot of cases there will be the engine number and the body number, and quite often the dealer that the car was sent to. So an important facility for classic car owners.
That's fantastic. And this is available for any member of the public with a BL car to access?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, they can actually by appointment see the production records for their car, but also for a small fee they can actually buy one of these certificates, as I say, which is a certified copy of that production record.
That is absolutely fantastic. One very last question. Of all the British cars, old or new, if you had to choose one to just spend some time with, what would it be?
Well, I'd take the one from the collection, and my first choice would have to be the Jaguar D-Type.
A very fine choice indeed. I do appreciate that car as well.
I'm here with Tony Marigold from the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust. Now, we're going to be having a quick chat about, well, this is one of the Overdrive producer's favouriteest cars in the world, actually his favourite car in the world, and it's the Jaguar D-Type. Tony, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks, fine.
So, Tony, if you could just give me a brief overview over why this is such an iconic vehicle and a favourite of so many people.
Right, okay. Well, the D-Type was actually the evolution of the Jaguar C-Type, which Jaguar raced in the early 50s, and they won a couple of Le Mans in it. But then when the D-Type out, they won Le Mans another couple of times in it. And this one didn't actually win Le Mans, but this is the last but one D-Type built, and it did race at Le Mans, came 6th in 1956, and then went on to the Reims 12-hour race that year, which it did win.
Given it, I mean, it sounds like it's had quite a few different stages to getting to what it is now. Do you want to talk me through any of that?
Yes, inevitably any car of this age has been through various stages, to say various owners. Yes. It was originally raced as a Jaguar Works car, so this is one of 6 long-nose D-types, sorry, one of 12 long-nose D-types. 6 were Jaguar Works cars, 6 were customers, so this is one of the Jaguar Works ones. So it was entered under the Jaguar Works team, and then after it won the Reims race, inevitably race cars got sold. So it then went off to the States in the early 60s. It was raced in the States by Briggs Cunningham for a few years, and then I think after enough years of racing, it went to an honourable retirement and spent about 20 years in the Italian National Motor Museum.
Oh wow! So how did you come to acquire this?
I'm not sure of the exact history, but certainly Jaguar Trust didn't own it at the time, and I think we actually bought it as a private sale some time ago, and then brought it back to the UK, and yes, it's been in our ownership ever since. And part of the whole point of the cars now being owned by the trust, not by a commercial organisation, is the trust protects them for the future, and anyone who's thinking of making me an offer, not interested. Doesn't matter how many noughts are on the end.
I don't blame you. It is absolutely beautiful, and I wouldn't let it go for the world.
We were hoping to bring you a feature on this Jaguar XJR 9, but it broke, so here instead is something else from the collection.
So we are 2 generations on now and nearly 3 decades on, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. This car is now in the early 80s. So this car was 1984. It's a Jaguar XJS with the V12 engine. So whereas the D-Type was based on the XK 6-cylinder engine, this is Jaguar's next engine, and you've had the E-Type in between. So yeah, 2 generations to take us to the XJS, and yeah, probably 2.5 decades on from the D-Type, yes.
Now, I noticed on the rear of this wonderful vehicle, there are the initials TWR, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, and in fact you can't see from camera, but TWR stands for Tom Wilkinshaw Racing, which was he's the guy who ran the racing team that this car was in. So this wasn't a factory entered car, it was run by Tom Wilkinshaw Racing, and it was raced by Tom Wilkinshaw himself and his co-driver Wyn Percy. So yeah, TWR, Tom Walkinshaw Racing.
And I assume with a name like Wyn Percy that this car has won its fair share of races.
I think not just fair share, it won more than its fair share. They started racing the XJSs in 82, didn't have a brilliant year, raced again in 83, again not brilliant. 84, basically they wiped the floor, and the competition was the Germans in BMWs, and it's always good to beat the BMWs. Yeah. And basically, yes, so in 1984, the TWR racing team won the European Touring Car Championship with this car.
That is amazing. And as you said earlier, all of the cars you acquire have their own significant story. Yes. Is there anything else to this one's story?
I think winning the European Touring Car Series is probably a big enough story itself. I'm not aware of anything else specific on that, but yes. So the name of the guy who owned the racing team on the car, you know, there's not that many people who say they've got that either.
No, and it is a beautiful vehicle to have your name to.